Right, this video has been a long time in waiting. It's basically the day Israel attacked the United States. They attacked a ship called the U.S. Liberty. And the reason why I'm doing this video, again, most people, whenever you bring up things like this, they call you names like anti-Semite and whatever have you. But it's just to show you the intent of the Israeli government, how far they are willing to go to get you into war. Again, I have nothing against Jewish people, nothing against the Israelis per se, but their government is batshit crazy evil. They're a Zionist government, and the problem is in Washington, they're completely compliant with the Zionist government. And the problem with that is U.S. foreign policy is basically based on Israeli foreign policy, which is basically for the Greater Israel projects, which I already did a video on that. But this is just one kind of an incident to kind of give you an idea that, for example, if Iran were to have done this or the Syrians were to have done this, we'd already be at full-scale war, boots on the ground in those countries, as an actual war, not as a proxy war. It just goes to show you how much Israel can do no wrong type of thing with their government, because when you have two governments in cahoots with each other across the world, the people are going to suffer on both sides. So that said, let's get into this. This is basically some stuff that of people who described the incident and stuff like that, and talked about what happened on that day. So anyway, I'll just get into it. Here we go. We had surveilled all morning and a part of the afternoon by the Israeli forces, or been observed by the Israeli forces. They knew who we were. We heard them report over the radio. We were and how we were sailing, where and how we were sailing, and where we were going to sail to. They saw the flag and everything else. We were in international waters. Senator Alid Stevenson III in 1980, his later year as a U.S. state senator from Illinois, invited Jim Ennes, E-N-N-E-S, to Senate office for a private 2-hour meeting to discuss the U.S. Liberty attack and cover-up. Following the private meeting, Ennis was invited back the next day to discuss the attack with members of Stevenson's staff, along with the members of the staff of Senator Barry Goldwater and member of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. In that meeting, the staff members told Ensign that they found his story convincing, but they would recommended to both senators that they not pursue an investigation because the investigation would only antagonize Israel's interest while nothing good could come of it. Goldwater accepted the staff recommendation, and Stevenson did not. Instead, Stevenson called a news conference in which he announced that he was convinced that the attack was deliberate and that the survivors deserved an investigation. He would, he said, spend the remaining few weeks of his Senate term attempting to arrange for an inquiry. Almost immediately, the Israeli government of the government of Israel contacted the White House and offered to settle an outstanding $40 million damages claim and $6 million, an amount to $1 for each Jewish victim of the Holocaust. Vice President Walter Mondale quickly agreed to that offer just before Christmas, while Congress and the President Carter were on vacation. The Department of the State followed immediately, and the press release reported for the front page of the New York Times, which announced the book is now closed on the U.S. Liberty. Well, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I'm a Canadian, and I'm watching it. When I heard about this, I'm like, are you kidding me? When they say Israel's the #1 ally to the United States in the Middle East, mind you, they also say this about Saudi Arabia as well. It really, no. I mean, if it was any other country, they would be at war with them right away. There was, we'll get into kind of why they probably did it. But anyway, indeed, from that point on, it was impossible to generate a congressional interest in the Liberty at all. Senator Stevens and staff told me later that they felt that the settlement was directly related to Senator Stevens' announcement plan to hold an inquiry and was engineered to block the forever and inquiry plans. Israel did subsequently pay the $6 million in 3 annual installments of $2 million each. Now, mind you, they probably took the money that they got from the United States and gave it back. So, whatever. You paid for your own. Okay, anyway. Secretary of State Dean Rusk said later that he could consider the payments meaningless as Congress merely increased an annual Israeli allotment by that amount. So, in other words, not only did the Israelis attack a U.S. warship but they used U.S. tax dollars to bribe. That's, oh my God, that's horrible. Alid Stevenson later ran for governor of Illinois. He was strongly opposed by the Israeli and Jewish interests. He lost. Many feel that it was support of the liberty that cost him the election. Many feel that Stevenson experiences with the liberty that was intimidated or members of Congress who might otherwise support the survivors. Cover-up claim in an attack and Admiral Inquiry's facts of the Liberty raid. Washington, AP, retirement admin Thomas Moore accused of the U.S. and Israeli government yesterday of covering up the evidence surrounding the 1967 Israeli attack on the American intelligence ship USS Liberty. 34 American crew members were killed, 171 wounded in a combined air-sea attack June 8, 1967, against the reconnaissance ship cruising in international waters 15 miles off the Sinai Peninsula during the Six-Day War. Okay, Israel maintains its fighter pilots who buzzed the ship for 8 hours before attacking, and torpedo crews mistook the Liberty for an Egyptian ship, which would have been impossible. If you follow a ship for 8 hours, you're going to see the ensign of the ship. You're going to see the American flag on there all over the place, right? The Israelis maintain the ship was a clear mistaken identity, but clearly does not hold water, said Moore, who was chief of the naval operations at the time of the attack. It is clear visibility. This unique ship was very easy to identify. The Israeli forces circled the ship and proceeded to attack over an extended period of time. There is simply no way the fighter pilots and torpedo crews could have come to such a conclusion, he said. Moreover, a former chairman of Joint of Chiefs of Staff joined a dozen of surviving crew members of the USS Liberty and seminar during the annual convention of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee in Washington. He suggested that the incident was a deliberate attack to prevent the Liberty from picking up signals that could have forwarded the United States of an Israeli military push into Syria the next day. Based upon the way this tragedy was handled, both the United States and Israel, one must conclude that there is much information that has not been made available to the public, Moore said. Well, of course not. I mean, this is something that, again, this is why people aren't joining the military as much anymore, because they realize that the governments really use you as cannon fodder. I mean, to me, that was a deliberate act of war. At best, okay, they should have at least cut off the funding to Israel, for that, indefinitely. At worst, full-out war with Israel, whatever. But again, the problem is you have Israelis pretty much running the U.S. government, or such pro-Israel lobby running the government, right? So that's the problem you have. So those people on the U.S. Liberty that died for nothing, it's really hollow felt. Because there is no real apology from Israel. They did it deliberately, right? The U.S. Sixth Fleet position nearby received a distress call from the Liberty. One carrier dispatched a squadron to search for the disabled ship before the ship was found, and the fleet received orders from Washington ordering the planes back. Moore called on the Congress to once and for all clear up the uncertain speculation of the unanswered questions surrounding the tragedy, which is still brought by many to deliberate the cover-up on the part of the government of Israel as well as the government of the United States. The following appeared in the fall of 1995, Volume 8, Number 3, issue of International Journal of Intelligence, Counterintelligence. The attack on the Liberty, an accident by Revers S. Fischel. Although David Rodman's review of the secret war against the Jews hosts how Western espionage betrayed the Jewish people, by John Loftus and Mark Aarons notes some of the serious flaws in the work. His critics contain his own serious flaws that should gall anyone who knows a few basics. Unaccompanied facts about Israel on June 8, 1967, attack on the electronic intelligence ship, the USS Liberty. All serious scholars on the subject of Israel's assault have been perpetrated quite deliberately, but Roman says that the most credible explanation of the attack is that it was an accident. I doubt that. an 8-hour accident. I don't think it's like Benghazi. It's not an accident. To see the flagrant and mismanagement of the IJIC, considering its standards and facilities of the Starling assault on the Liberty in 1980 by James Ensign and lieutenant who was on the bridge during the attack, was very big seller. So the facts of the case are not to be out of anyone's reach. In fact, Israel's attack on the Liberty was such an accident. Japan's, was such accidental as Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. So, yeah, a good parallel there. Yeah, it was about as accidental as that. Yeah. Scanning the skies, the U.S. government had posted the Liberty off the coast of Gaza in the international waters to monitor developments of the region during the Six-Day War. The Liberty's mission was to discuss in detail below. At the dawn of June 8th, Israel's aircraft began reconnoitering the ship, some flying so close that the pilots could clearly be seen, and low as the masthead and height is obviously photographed. The extensive operation lasted 7 hours. 7 hours, and involved 8 separate observations in about 0600 to 0900, then 10, 10:30, 11, and 11:30 and 12:15 p.m. The U.S. intercepts stations twice overhead. Israel pilots reported the ship was American. The visible conditions were perfect. The ship and the American flag were flying free and clear in a good breeze. At 1400, a well-considered attack by a jet aircraft and a torpedo boats began. Jets hammered the virtual unarmed ship with cannons and rockets and napalm it. Its forward machine guns were wiped out in the first firing pass, and whatever transmits antennas and survived the pass were disabled by the second 9 minutes into the attack. Crews jury-jigged a transmitter to antenna, and a radio man discovered 4 out of 5 of the ship's radio frequencies, including the international distress frequency, were being jammed. Ironically, the only time Liberty could transmit was while the jets were firing their missiles. A frantic cry for help was sent to the Sixth Fleet, only 400 miles away off the coast of Crete. Despite Israel's jamming, the Liberty plea for assistance was received, and the patchwork transmission arranged cease functions soon forward. Torpedo boats soon arrived and continued to attack, firing 5 torpedoes, with 1 hitting and killing 25 men. The leisurely circle and defense of the ship, 40 minutes pumping rounds of 40mm, 20mm, and 50-cal rounds at the men on deck, stretching the barriers and stretching the barriers and the firefighters, thinking the ship was about to sink. The crew threw the life rafts over the side. The attack and machine gunners over the side. The attackers machine gunned those too, with the increasing radio activity from the U.S. Sixth Fleet indicating an imminent U.S. response. Many of the fleeing message bore flash predators. The Israelis suddenly contacted the U.S. Embassy and informed it of this accident. It was probably the longest accidental act in history of naval warfare. 1 hour and 15 minutes. So they made a mistake for 1 hour and 15 minutes, if you can believe that. And knowing how well the Israeli pilots are trained, and the Israeli Navy is trained, they didn't make an accident. They're like the Mossad. They don't make mistakes. 2 separate flights of jets from the carrier of the American Saratoga were recalled by the Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, and the first flight, probably because Washington was absolutely certain was not absolutely certain of the attack. Identity was the Lear Star starting a war with the Russians if they were the guilty party. The second flight was recalled after the receipt of the Israeli explanation. More evidence of guilt. Let's see, here we go here. In order to the abomination of circumstances which showed that Israel's attack was deliberate and likely and carefully surveillanced. The radio jamming and numerous other details belie Israel's professional innocence. They include the Israelis' international claim that they had mistaken the Liberty for an Egyptian ship, El Quasir. But the El Quasir was only 40% of the size of the Liberty. 4,000 versus 4,000 versus 10,400 tons. The El Quasar was old, rustabout horse transport, and bore as much resemblance to the Liberty as a rusty VW does to a new Cadillac. The Liberty was arrayed with numerous special antennas and ultramodern for 1967 60-foot microwave dish and devices possessed by no other ships in the world other than the sister ship Beaumont. She bore standard U.S. Navy markings, which included a freshly painted 10-foot hull number and the Liberty on the stern. The radio jamming by itself, damning evidence of the assailants knowing exactly whom they were attacking. Such jamming requires imminent advanced knowledge of the targets being jammed, obtained by extended monitoring of the signals. And this was selective jamming in struck Liberty's frequencies and no other. Okay. Keep going here a little bit more. Afterwards, in one of their ever-changing explanations, the Israelis claimed to have learned that the ship identity and heard its distress signal, but the attack continued for 66 minutes after the first distress signal, which the Israelis had jammed, was sent. Had particularly Israel claimed been true, they would have recalled the torpedo boats before they even reached the ship. The Israelis claimed that the ship, U.S. flag, hung limp because there was no wind. Later, when presented with the facts that the flag was perfectly visible, they claimed that they thought the ship was an enemy vessel flying false colors. They extended radio monitoring and exposed considerable advanced investigation of the Liberty's communications facilities, refuting this claim. The Israelis claimed that the torpedo boats, after sighting the ship, had called the aircraft to attack after the ship refused to identify itself as an obvious lie, because the attack was clearly pre-planned and well coordinated, 1-2 punch, deploying different punches of the Israeli defense forces. The jets were already intended to attacking the ship before the Liberty came into torpedo boat radar range, directly considering themselves, as the Israelis later claimed, that directly contradicting themselves, as the Israelis claimed that the aircraft had called in the torpedo boats. The Israelis eventually admitted that before the attack, their commander had compared the reconnaissance photos to the Liberty with Jane's fighting ships. But they claimed that before the attack, they twice telephoned the U.S. Naval Archives in Tel Aviv to inquire whether the Liberty was the U.S. ship, and were told there were no U.S. ships in the area. They claim that they have received negative reply, and they decided that the ship had been the El Quasar. However, the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv later the naval attachments empathetically stated that no such inquiries were made. The Israelis not only knew the ship and the nationality that she was, and an inlet ship, so they knew she was the Liberty herself. Immediately preceding the attack, Israeli pilot recognized the Liberty as a U.S. ship and radioed his information to the IDF headquarters. He was instructed to attack anyway. His dialogue was intercepted at the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. Former U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon, Dwight Porter, revealed the existence of this interception in 1991. Finally, there is the evidence of the circumstantial but clear of relationship between the attack on the Liberty and the postponement of Israel's planned attack on the Golan Heights. The Golan attack was scheduled for 11 a.m. on June 8th. The Liberty was spotted at 6 a.m. and earlier last-minute orders delayed the Golan attacks, and the Liberty was put out of commission, and the Golan attack occurred shortly thereafter. The vaulted IDF made very few mistakes in this war. And that is true. I mean, the 67 war was pretty strategically fought by Israel. There's no doubt about that. After the attacks, the Secretary of State, Dean Rusk, recommended that the strongest response to the Presidential Council, Clark Clifford advised President Johnson to treat Israel in the same manner that as the U.S. would treat the Soviets and Arabs if they had committed such atrocities. The U.S. would have certainly have not taken this insult to the silence, and the offender would of the country, any country but Israel. But President Johnson stoically accepted Israel's explanation, and the naval conduct of court of inquiry, which ignored all, even suppressed testimony that the attack had been deliberate. It dealt with only with the actions and performances of the Liberty and the crew. State Department legal advisor Carl Salins performed the assessment of Israel's official explanation, and only the Navy's highly incomplete and erroneous preliminary investigation to go on. He although discredited the Israeli government claims that the claims of innocent error. The logical step was to confront the Israelis with his findings, but that was never done. The U.S. government enacted was complete out of keeping the outrageousness of the attack. So again, protect Israel at all costs, right? That tells you who's really not on your side in your government. That is something like, when I first heard about this, again, in the age of the internet, you finally start hearing about stuff like this, and then you realize how how bad, the corruption is, right? What was Israel's motive for this act? The schedule of the Israeli assault on the Golan Heights for June 8th was a move to defeat the intense effort of the United Nations to halt the war, and a ceasefire being scheduled for June 9th. Such pressure was also being applied by the U.S. government and the IDF, where the pressure to acquire the Golan before the ceasefire was imposed, preferably by being labeled the aggressor. As in 1956, the Israelis had colluded with Britain and France to attack Egypt, but all the pressure to attack Syria. After all, they hurried preparations to do so. The Golan Height was attacked suddenly, called off within hours of its schedule being committed. Why? Obviously, somebody in the IDF leadership feared the Liberty might intercept some of the many signals, then filling the air would be expose Israel. Preparations levels for invasion. This might have been forced into ceasefire before the conquered of the incumbent territories. Okay, we're getting down there. Let's see how I'm doing for time here. Oh yeah, okay, we're still good. Lofts and Aaron's book. I'm just going to scroll down a bit here. Lofts and Aaron's book on the subject of Rodman's critic of the collection of preposterous, demonstrable false theories and allegations with the regard of the Liberty attack. The only significant detail and get right is that it was deliberate. But the actual make of the ludicrous statement that Israel's attack was justified because the Liberty was gathering electronic information on Israel's troop movements and sending it to British intelligence, which in turn relayed it to the Arabs. Not only does this statement lack genuine authentication, it also betrays the conspiratorial mindedness that makes all their other concoctions suspicious. Another claim born of the same free-ranging investigations in the United States intelligence attempted to curry the favor of the Arab oil productions by giving the precise details of Israel's orders battle to the Arabs during the war. Other ridiculous claims. Civilian spies of the National Security Agency, NSA, were wrestled control of, i.e. hijacked the Liberty from the U.S. military, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Commander McCollum, Liberty skipper, did not know it at the time that the real masters of his ships were the civilian spies of the NSA, and that the U.S. elite ships collection assignments were drawn up as the NSA is well known. It is not too big a secret that the authors make it. Biggest secret that the authors make of it. They state that only the individual knows as an NSA major or two others had access to the super sensitive communication areas. On the ship there were reality well over 100 men worked. The individuals were referred to was Alan Blue, a 23-year-old Arab linguistic who was killed. Blue was just GS7, a relatively low-level civilian NSA employee, not a major. And the NSA does not confer military rank. Israel's tried to jam the ship's frequency to no effect. The Liberty's equipment was much too sophisticated to be stopped in that fashion. Anyone who wants to believe this statement should ask the American radio men who were desperately trying to find open frequencies which alerted the potential rescuers while their comrades were falling dead around them. The Liberty was there to spy on the Jews. That was its only mission. It had to be a case of Hebrew linguistics who would have been aboard. There were none. Therefore, they weren't spying on the Jews. There were at least 4 Russian and 3 Arabic linguistics aboard. However, the indication of the ship's intelligence targeting additionally ends was recently disclosed that the special task of the ship, apart from gathering all the information about the party it could, was determined if a Tu-95 Bear bomber of the Egyptian Air Force were controlled and flown by Soviets. And was also saying that at least 2 men recalled that their orders were to concentrate on Soviet interceptions and ignore Israeli signals they happened to hear. The other order was not to signal, and if it is Israeli, drop it. Okay, so in other words, they were of no threat to Israel. Lofts and Aaron's other falsities concerning the Liberty, let alone the including of the rest of their work, are far many too numerous to mention. They continually cite unidentified sources, confidential interviews of former CIA officers and former NSA employees, exe those they are free to intervene whatever suits them. Yet Rodman says that this work deserves to be taken seriously. They allege the mass espionage campaign against the Jewry and Israel by the Western intelligence agencies and claim that their agencies aided Arab armies and many Arab-Israel wars. Rodman terms this work an important subject that thus far receives its due. I'm just going to put a little quick note in here. Don't want to get too sidetracked here, but that's the way the Israelis always play. So even when they're caught red-handed, they try to spin it so that we had to do this to you because you guys were doing something bad to us, right? So, and clearly they weren't. A question of motive. Rodman's treatment of the Liberty attack resembles the accounts put forth by the Israeli government. He repeats that Israel's obvious false intention explanations, mistaken identity, stating that the Liberty was roughly the same size and shape as the El Quasar. He admits to some knowledge that the arguments regarding the deliberateness of the attack mentioned above therefore cannot claim innocence, but he states that those who maintain that the attack was deliberate are unable to present incontrovertible evidence of their claim. He would have us believe that until proven otherwise, the official explanation remains the most credible, that the only official explanation apart from the ever-changing one presented by Israel are the serious incomplete Navy inquiries and Salas reports, and fail to address the much evidence described by the lack of authority because of those flaws. But while the U.S. government has never officially examined most of the above circumstances or admitted that Israel's attack was deliberate, it also never accepted Israel's claim that the attack was an error. Liberty survivors present voluminous evidence of Israel's guilt to the U.S. Congress and have received investigation, but without success. Again, yeah, they're going to leave it in limbo. Why? Because if they actually have to address it, again, it's the same thing with 9/11. It shows the link between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which are supposed to be allies. That's why they didn't want to release the 28 pages. Remember, the U.S. Liberty is kind of the first coined false flag, not the first false flag, but kind of the first coined false flag, one of the first coined ones. So again, as to the motive of the attack, Rodman omits that the often mentioned theory concerning the Golan invasion presented above, which is plausible, probable, and damning. However, he states that many unfortunate accounts of this incident assert that the attack was deliberate part of a devious Israeli plot. The many unofficial accounts of the assert that Israel's guilt have been provided by persons of such stature and reputation as Dr. Louis Trodella, NSA's deputy director in 1967, who termed one of the Israeli explanations a nice whitewash, and a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Thomas Moore, formerly Secretary of State Dean Rusk, and the Liberty survivors. One of Rodman's errors is errors in on the difference nature, the frequency, misuse, and the term anti-Semitism, Semites, and descendants of Sem Jews and Arabs. Rodman even applies the term anti-Semites to the Saudi kings, Ibn Saud himself, Semite. Liberty survivors of some of them Jewish have been in this label simply for calling the attention to the Israeli attack, as many other people who criticize the Israeli government. Rodman states that the Liberty attack causes some loss of life, 34 Americans killed, 171, 205 Purple Hearts out of the crew of 293 casualties. Indeed. Again, so they're going to give you a medal to hush you up. Say, okay, well, thanks for taking the shots. Here's your medal for being brave. That's kind of a little bit hollow, don't you think? Note on source of Ennis assaults on Liberty. It is out of the print of blue autograph copies of the updated enclosed, the available through Terry's Bookstore, P.O. Box 789, Woodville. Okay, I'll just skip all that for $20 anyway. A more recent study also defined John Bourne's book, The U.S. Liberty Detained the VS History vs. the Official Story. Bourne's is work especially vulnerable and valuable in finding that they have turned up the years N's books came out and available in writing. Okay, so I'll just yeah, I'm gonna skip that. Books. I think these are all books here. Yeah. Okay. I think that's it. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's about it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's. So anyway, yeah. I think I read enough there so that you guys get an idea of what happened. Okay, so you've got this story. It's quite the story, and it's really shows. I mean, right now the big one is going to be how Israel and the United States are arming ISIS. You know, they call them moderate rebels, but it starts off with things like this. So I'm going to leave it at about that anyway. There's not much more I could say. I wanted to talk about this one for a long time. And open the discussion on it. So anyway, if you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation to the channel. Thank you very much to everybody who has. Next to that, rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourself, be true to others. Always do the right thing, and have yourselves a great day. Eh? Good day, hi, and welcome. Alright, this video has been a long time in waiting. It's basically the day Israel attacked the United States. They attacked a ship called the U.S. Liberty. And the reason why I'm doing this video, again, most people, whenever you bring up things like this, they call you names like anti-Semite and whatever have you. But it's just to show you the intent of the Israeli government, how far they're willing to go to get you into war. Again, I have nothing against Jewish people, nothing against the Israelis per se, but their government is batshit crazy evil. They're a Zionist government, and the problem is in Washington, they're completely compliant with the Zionist government, and the problem with that is U.S. foreign policy is basically based on Israeli foreign policy, which is basically for the Greater Israel Projects, which I already did a video on that, but this is just one kind of an incident to kind of give you an idea that for example, if Iran were to have done this or the Syrians were to have done this, we'd already be at full-scale war, boots on the ground in those countries, as an actual war, not as a proxy war. It just goes to show you how much Israel can do no wrong type of thing with their government, because when you have two governments in cahoots with each other across the world, the people are going to suffer on both sides. So that said, let's get into this. This is basically some stuff that of people who described the incident and stuff like that, and talked about what happened on that day. So anyway, I'll just get into it. Here we go. We had surveilled all morning and a part of the afternoon by the Israeli forces, or been observed by the Israeli forces. They knew who we were. We heard them report over the radio. We were and how we were sailing, where and how we were sailing, and where we were going to sail to. They saw the flag and everything else. We were in international waters. Senator Alid Stevenson III in 1980, his later year as a U.S. state senator from Illinois, invited Jim Ennis Ennes, ENNES, to Senate office for a private 2-hour meeting to discuss the U.S. Liberty attack and cover-up. Following the private meeting, Ennis was invited back the next day to discuss the attack with members of Stevenson's staff, along with the members of the staff of Senator Barry Goldwater and member of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. In that meeting, the staff members told Ensign that they found his story convincing, but they would recommended to both senators that they not pursue an investigation because the investigation would only antagonize Israel's interest while nothing good could come of it. Goldwater accepted the staff recommendation, and Stevenson did not. Instead, Stevenson called a news conference in which he announced that he was convinced that the attack was deliberate and that the survivors deserved an investigation. He would, he said, spend the remaining few weeks of his Senate term attempting to arrange for an inquiry. Almost immediately, Israeli government of the government of Israel contacted the White House and offered to settle an outstanding $40 million damages claim and $6 million, an amount to $1 for each Jewish victim of the Holocaust. Vice President Walter Mondale quickly agreed to that offer just before Christmas while Congress and the President Carter were on vacation. The Department of the State followed immediately, and the press release reported for the front page of the New York Times, which announced the book is now closed on the U.S. Liberty. Well, you know, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I'm a Canadian, and I'm watching it. When I heard about this, I'm like, are you kidding me? When they say Israel's the #1 ally to the United States in the Middle East, mind you, they also say this about Saudi Arabia as well. You know, it really, no. I mean, if it was any other country, they would be at war with them right away. There was, you know, we'll get into kind of why they probably did it. But anyway, indeed, from that point on, it was impossible to generate a congressional interest in the Liberty at all. Senator Stevens and staff told me later that they felt that the settlement was directly related to Senator Stevens' announcement plan to hold an inquiry and was engineered to block the forever and inquiry plans. Israel did subsequently pay the $6 million in 3 annual installments of $2 million each. Now, mind you, they probably took the money that they got from the United States and gave it back. So, you know, yeah, whatever. You paid for your own. Okay, anyway. Secretary of State Dean Rusk said later that he could consider the payments meaningless as Congress merely increased an